Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatyaresha Tadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, verse 51. Oh, that's the last verse. Tato vayam mat pramukha yad arte Babhuvi matman karavana kimte Tvam swachaksu paradehi shaktya Deva kriyate yad anugrahanam Tata. Therefore, Vayam, all of us, Mat Pramukha, coming from the total cosmos, the Mahatattva, Yad Arte, for the purpose of which Babhuvima, created, Atman, O Supreme Self, Karavama, shall do, Kim, what, Te, your service, Tvam, yourself, Na, to us, Swachakshush, personal plan, Paridehi, specifically grant us, Shaktya, with potency to work, Deva, O Lord, Kriya Arte, for acting, Yat, from which, Anugrahana, of those who are specifically favored. Translation, O Supreme Self, please give us who are created in the beginning from the Mahatattva, the total cosmic energy, your kind directions on how we shall act. Kindly award us your perfect knowledge and potency so that we can render you service in the different departments of subsequent creation. Purport. The Lord creates this material world and impregnates the material energy with the living entities who will act in the material world. All these actions have a divine plan behind them. The plan is to give the conditioned souls who so desire a chance to enjoy sense gratification. But there is another plan behind the creation to help the living entities realize that they are created for the transcendental sense gratification of the Lord and not for their individual sense gratification. This is the constitutional position of the living entities. The Lord is one without a second, and he expands himself into many for his transcendental pleasure. All the expansions, Vishnu Tattvas, Jiva Tattvas, and Shakti Tattvas, the personality of Godhead, the living entity, and the different potential energies, are different offshoots from the same one Supreme Lord. The Jiva Tattvas are separated expansions of the Vishnu Tattvas, and although there are potential differences between them, they're all meant for the transcendental sense gratification of the Supreme Lord. Some of the Jivas, however, wanted to lord it over material nature in imitation of the lordship of the personality of Godhead. Regarding when and why such propensities overcame the pure living entities, it can only be explained that the Jiva Tattvas are infinitesimal independence, and that due to misuse of this independence, some of the living entities have become implicated in the conditions of cosmic creation and are therefore called Nitya Buddhas, or eternally conditioned souls. The expansions of Vedic wisdom also give the Nitya Buddhas the conditioned living entities a chance to improve, and those who take advantage of such transcendental knowledge gradually regain their lost consciousness of rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord. Demigods are amongst the conditioned souls who have developed this pure consciousness of service to the Lord, but who at the same time continue to desire to lord it over the material energy. Such mixed consciousness puts the conditioned soul in the position of managing the affairs of this creation. The demigods are entrusted leaders of the conditioned souls, as some of the old prisoners in government jails are entrusted with some responsible work of prison management, so the demigods are improved conditioned souls, acting as representatives of the Lord in the material creation. Just demigods are devotees of the Lord in the material world, and when completely free from all material desires to lord it over the material energy, they become pure devotees and have no desire but to serve the Lord. Therefore, any living entity who desires a position in the material world may desire so in the service of the Lord, and may seek power and intelligence from the Lord, as exemplified by the demigods in this particular verse. One cannot do anything unless he is enlightened and empowered by the Lord. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Mattaha smritir jnanam apohanam cha. All recollections, knowledge, etc., as well as all forgetfulness, are engineered by the Lord, who is sitting within the heart of everyone. The intelligent man seeks the help of the Lord, and the Lord helps the sincere devotees engaged in his multifarious services. The demigods are entrusted by the Lord to create different species of living entities according to their past deeds. They are here in asking the favor of the Lord for the intelligence and power to carry out their task. Similarly, any conditioned soul may also engage in the service of the Lord under the guidance of an expert spiritual master, and thus gradually become freed from the entanglement of material existence. The spiritual master is the manifested representative of the Lord, and anyone who puts himself under the guidance of a spiritual master and acts accordingly is said to be acting in terms of buddhi yoga, as explained in Bhagavad Gita. Vyavasaya makabudir ekteha kurunandana. Bahushakyanantascha buddhayo vyavasayanam. That's the end of Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 5th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Vidura's Talks with Maitreya. So here we had a series of prayers by the Devatas. And as Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, the Devatas are also servants and devotees of the Supreme Lord, and actually more advanced than us. And he gives the example, sometimes in the prison house, some prisoners get a little position there and they supervise the other prisoners. So the Devatas are in a higher position, but they're still classed as prisoners because they have a material body. And even if we go to the top, where we get in Tapaloka, we get sages. And then in Brahmaloka, we get Brahma. And the inhabitants there with very subtle bodies. It is said that Brahma has a body of Mahatattva, which is the most subtle aspect of Prakriti, the first visible aspect of Prakriti. So a very subtle being, but still a material body. And because the living entities have material bodies, this is the sign that they've not reached perfection. They're still in the material world. They still have material bodies. They still have to die. So therefore, even if you're at the top in Brahmaloka, you're not perfect. So therefore, everybody is in the prison, so to speak. Of course, it is also said that if you're on Brahmaloka, Brahma's like the highest being, so generally, because he is so advanced, that when he gives up his material body, then he goes to the spiritual world. And all the inhabitants there, or most of the inhabitants, they're likely also to go as with him, but not everybody's perfect, so some have to come back again. They don't all automatically go. So if they're at that perfect stage, from Brahmaloka they give up their material bodies and they also go, but some stick in the material world. So in any case, all of the inhabitants in the material world have bodies, material bodies, and they're part of the prison system. But as we go to the upper planets, these living entities, devatas, not Lord Brahma, they have finer intelligence, finer bodies, more sattva, and they're also qualified largely with devotion to the Lord. And because they have that devotion, they are given special powers by the Supreme Lord. And therefore the devatas are allowed to dispense the needs of the living entities below them. Just like in the, I guess, the Brahmacharya ashram, you have the guy in charge of all the toothpaste and the soap and everything. He controls all that and gives it out. So he's got a special position there. So like this, the devatas are giving us the water and the sunlight and the whatever, air and everything we need to survive. But they have to do it according to the laws. They don't just give out that whimsically, I like this person, therefore I'm going to give them the water and the food. I don't like that person. So they have to be quite qualified to do things very impartially. So they do so impartially, but according to the law of karma. So they don't say, they don't invent their own rules for who should get and who should not get. So there's the bad prisoners and the good prisoners. And the bad prisoners, how do they know that? Because they got the bad karma. So there's a list of things we have to not give them. So then some of the prisoners are deprived of certain things. Devatas are not going to give the food, not going to give the money, not going to give this, not going to give that. So they have to struggle more in the material world. What a bad karma. So the devatas simply, we can't blame the devatas for punishing us by withholding, sunlight or water or money, etc. They are simply acting according to the law of karma. The law is there; they follow the law. So, why do we get bad karma? Why do other people get good karma? Again, we can't blame the law. It's the jivas who do activities, and they get the results according to the law. So therefore, we can't blame the devatas for enacting the law. It is the jivas, because they do certain activities, they get the bad karma, they get the punishment. So don't blame the devatas, don't blame the Supreme Lord, don't blame the law of karma. Blame the individual person for his previous activities. So he's simply suffering the results of previous action. The devatas act as the prison wardens, even though they're in the prison. They act as the prison wardens and dispense things neutrally, according to the law of the Supreme Lord. So the devatas are part of the plan also. The Lord likes to engage everybody, so he engages the first-class prisoners, and they do their work as devatas and supply things to us according to the law of karma. It all happens because the Lord has a greater plan. Why do the devatas exist? Why do the material world exist? Why does Brahma exist? That's also a plan of the Supreme Lord. But this is also discussed in the third canto. It goes back to Mahavishnu glancing over material energy and injecting jivas, which is described in the previous verse, and consequently that invisible prakriti, which is so subtle that no one can detect where it is and what it is, like black matter or dark energy in modern science. Suddenly it becomes visible and it starts glowing because of the consciousness of the jivas injected into it. So that's called mahatattva. That was described here, that the devatas, we arise from the mahatattva. Of course, mahatattva transforms into ahankara, which is also a very subtle material energy. And then Mahatattva transforms into mind, senses, sense objects, and gross material elements. And they combine, and they make universes. And they combine further under the direction of Lord Brahma, and we get bodies of living entities, 8,400,000 species. And we get planets. Brahma makes planets and bodies for the living entities. And then devatas, he makes devatas. And then the devatas put their positions, and they start giving karmas to all the jivas in the material world. So, all planned out with the Mahavishnu deciding when he's going to glance. When he decides to glance, then it takes place. And when he decides, okay, finished everybody, all disappears, goes back into him. When he breathes in, all disappears. But he breathes out, said, okay, let's start again. Then it all happens. So we can say it's the plan of Mahavishnu. But we know that Mahavishnu is just an amsa. He's only an expansion from the forms in the spiritual world. He's Mahashankarshan, and there's a higher Shankarshan in Vaikuntha. And if we go higher and higher, then we say the original Adi Shankarshan, who is Balaram in Goloka. And Balaram is an expansion of Krishna. So then we say, well, what is Krishna's plan behind this? He's the ultimate behind Mahavishnu and all these others. So what's his plan? So, as Prabhupada explains here, one plan, of course, is that jivas are so insistent for continual enjoyment with material bodies in the material world that he keeps this process up, and again he makes another universe, and he puts the jivas into it. And when they're completely frustrated and exhausted, then he makes everything disappear for some time. But then, again, they start getting restless. So then he creates all the universes again, and he puts the jivas back in there, and they continue like this. So because of the insistence of the jivas, he does this. So that we can ask, well, that's like satisfying a bad child and giving him all the sweets and whatever. But we know that he's going to get bad teeth and whatever, maybe get too passionate and violent when you give him too much sugar. So why you do that? Why you keep giving him all that stuff? Why this? What's the plan of the Lord behind that? Why does he do all this? So, yes, to some degree you have to pacify the child. So if they want sugar, you have to give them some sweets. But then there's a limit also. We don't give too much or whatever. So that's why we have the law of karma there. Yes, you want your enjoyment, but again, we're going to restrict you. You go overboard, then you get the law of karma on you. You don't get your sugar. You don't get your pleasure in the material world anymore. You get suffering instead. So everything gets balanced out. The Supreme Lord has a plan. We may think it's unjust because we don't like suffering. But that's the result of our activities we've done. So that's what we get. So there's a law there, and the law is there to, particularly for the human beings, to educate us. Why we have to get educated is because life after life, throughout the life of Brahma and the previous universe of Brahma, the previous universe, we didn't learn. Jivas are very slow learners. Like some prisoners in the prison. No matter what you try to do to them, they never get corrected. So that's the history of the jivas who have to stay in the material world. They never learn. Repeatedly, they experience the karmas, etc., but they never realize that it's their fault. They blame it on the prison warden or somebody else. So, why? Nature of the jiva is infinitesimal. Jiva is subject to Maya, influence of material nature, etc. Jiva is weak. Here Prabhupada says jiva touches an infinitesimal independence. And just that infinitesimal independence gives them this decision: I'm going to stay in the material world and try again, and again, and again, and again. So, the hope is that through this process of repeated experience, eventually some jivas will change their minds and get a little bit of realization. I don't like all this suffering and repeated things. Must be a reason for it, whatever. Let me try to find a solution to all of this. So that's the whole purpose of the karma, to get us frustrated and to realize there has to be some higher purpose in life. At the same time, it is a process to regulate the jivas to some degree. When they get too unruly, they get thrown into lower bodies where they don't have to do too much, like animals and plants. And when they get enough intelligence, whatever, then, they get human bodies. And if they misuse that into menace, they go down lower again. So it's a very intricate system worked out by the Supreme Lord according to the law of karma. The Lord has this idea, we have to satisfy the jivas somehow or other. We still have to regulate them and get them some sort of advancement. So that's the, we could say, the plan of the Supreme Lord. So let the jivas get some advancement, though it is very gradual. But the Lord is more merciful than that. And therefore, he makes more plans, not just the law of karma. So I mentioned previously, I think, that material nature itself is not so bad. It's called, Maya is said to be ignorance. But it's not just ignorance, vidya. It's also vidya. It's also knowledge. It has two faces to it. It's not complete knowledge, but there's a little bit of knowledge there. So largely we think of, ignorance and bad karma, etc. But within Prakriti itself, there is vidya or knowledge, which means we can at least understand we're not the body, we're the Atma. So if you get the sattva gun, then you can realize, I'm not the body. So the whole process of karma, and then we have karma yoga to help us get to that position. So this is another arrangement of the Supreme Lord. As I say, it's not complete knowledge, but it's this knowledge at least that we are Atma, not the body. So that much knowledge is given through material nature itself in the form of vidya. And then the Lord also gives scriptures. What does Brahma do? That's also described here in the Brahma Samhita. When he doesn't know how to create the universe, then as here also, the Devatas are praying. So Brahma is praying, please give me the knowledge by which I can create the universe. So what does the Lord do? He gives them the Vedas. He gives them scripture. Well, so how is that for creating the world? It's all spiritual. Yes, but it's also spiritual knowledge, and you need that spiritual knowledge as a devotee of the Lord to carry out the creation. So, along with the material world, the Lord gives spiritual knowledge. And included in that, of course, we have karma kanda and jnana kanda and bhakti. So the Lord gives scripture by which the jiva can advance, and can even advance beyond understanding he is Atma, because he does give the process of bhakti also. By that we understand Supreme Lord, his position, and then we can practice bhakti yoga. So the Lord does not abandon the jivas, and he gives them plenty of chances by that. Additionally, of course, he has manus in the material world, the descendants, to enforce karma yoga and varnashram. He has wise sages and devotees like Narada Muni there to preach the process of bhakti. And at all times there are devotees within this material world preaching. So through that, the Lord has the higher plan, not just to give the material entities enjoyment, but also to get them out of the material world. And then what happens? They participate eternally in the Lord's pastimes in the spiritual world. So that's the ultimate desire of the Supreme Lord and Krishna. So, therefore, there's we say the twofold purposes of the material world, but obviously the higher purpose is to get all the jivas out of the material world and have bliss in relationship with Krishna eternally. That's the real purpose of everything. There is another more esoteric purpose also. And that is the Lord likes to manifest his pastimes with his devotees outside of spiritual world, in the material world. So that's why the Lord comes with all of his devotees. And then he manifests his activities. So why does he like to do that? Because there is a certain excellence in the pastimes of the Lord within the material world, particularly Krishna. So what's that excellence? We see there's some difference between Krishna's pastimes here and Krishna's pastimes in the spiritual world. One difference is Krishna grows in the material world. He doesn't grow in the spiritual world. He's always Kaishore age. But here we see Krishna is born, his little baby, and Mother Yasoda's holding him in her arms like this, and giving him milk, etc., and taking care of him, because protecting him from the wild animals, etc., and feeding him. That form doesn't exist in the spiritual world. It exists here. So Mother Yasoda likes this, and Krishna likes this. So it's a kind of a special pastime that will take place in the material world. So not only that, we get the cowherd boys, different ages, different types of pastimes. So there is some difference between spiritual world and material world. And our Acharya said, well, yeah, some say that the pastimes in the material world of Krishna are even more attractive than those in the spiritual world. So therefore, in order to enjoy those pastimes, he'll keep the material world going on like this, and he'll keep appearing in the material world. So that's a more esoteric reason for the Lord to keep manifesting this world, so he can enjoy these pastimes with his devotees in his various ages, etc. So the Lord has his own plans behind everything here, and all of his plans are perfect. But from our point of view, we can't see the whole plan, so therefore we're liable to criticize it. Very difficult for us to see it. And even the devatas cannot understand completely. That's why they have to pray to the Supreme Lord. Please give us the intelligence by which we can do things properly. Because they don't know the whole plan also. They only know part of the plan, and even that, some know one part, the others know another part, so they don't know the whole thing. Just as we see with the case of the associates of Yamaraj, when they came to punish Ajamil. And then the Vishnudutas say, can't take him. And they say, why? And the Vishnudutas say, well, that's the order of our Lord. Our Lord is Vishnu, Narayana. You have to follow his order. This is shocking to the Yamadutas. Well, we didn't give that order. Our master is Yamaraj. But then the Vishnu says, well, our master is superior to him. He controls Yamaraj. You have to listen to us. They say, we didn't. We were ignorant. He didn't tell us. And then Yamaraj himself, well, they can blame Yamaraj, but again, Yamaraj, he doesn't know everything. He is covered over somewhat. He's, Devatas in the material world are there, but they're also within the prison house also. So he doesn't know everything. So the Devatas, they know something. They don't know everything completely about the Supreme Lord and how he operates. Therefore, some covering is there. So anyway, the whole process here is the Devatas are asking the Lord, please give us some intelligence so we can do things properly. So though this is, we could say, a type of prayer which has a little bit of a motive behind it, because their purpose is to produce and govern the material world properly. Because that is a service given to them by the Lord, therefore we can't criticize them. They're praying for the power of intelligence so they can do their particular type of devotional service for the Supreme Lord, implementing the system of the material world. But just as here the Devatas are praying in this way, please give us some proper knowledge. The devotees practicing pure bhakti, in the same way, they will request guru for knowledge by which they're able to surpass the material world and attain the lotus feet of Krishna. So that's what the devotee prays for, as represented in Bhagavad Gita here. Prabhupada gives this verse, Vyavasayamaka Buddhi. So one should have intelligence intelligence, which is one-pointed, not like that of people who worship devatas, which is bahushaka. They have many desires, so therefore they do many types of worship. That's what some people. So unlike that, the intelligent person has ekabuddhi, one-pointed intelligence which does not waver. So this particularly applies to the devotee who fixes his mind and his senses and activities upon the one Supreme Lord. And what he has is this buddhi, or this intelligence given to him. In his commentary on this, Vishnu Chakravarti talks about this intelligence that we're supposed to get through mercy of the Lord in devotional service. And we have to pray for this intelligence. So I said, what is that intelligence? What is that, this Vavasaya buddhi, ekeha kurunana? What is this intelligence which is fixed and one-pointed? So then he explains that it is the disciple prays to the guru. And what's he praying for? And ultimately, what does the guru give? What intelligence does he give? So that intelligence is that one should have a method by which one will be fixed in the worship of the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. That's the instruction the guru should give, and that's the intelligence that the devotee should have. Ultimately, that's the knowledge he should get. I should fix myself on the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna in pure worship. So he says the disciple has to take that instruction from the guru as his life-sustaining medicine. Just as some, I guess, if you have diabetes or something, heart disease or whatever, then the doctor gives you a prescription. You don't take this medicine, you're going to die. You have to take it. So you don't take it, then you die. So the life-sustaining medicine of the devotee is to follow that order of the guru, which is to worship the lotus feet of Radha Krishna and never deviate from that. So that's the intelligence one should get. So the good disciple, therefore, goes to the guru, and that's the question he has to ask. How can I attain the lotus feet of Radha Krishna? Rather than how can I get a job, or how can I raise my family, etc. Those are material questions. So the spiritual question is, how can I attain the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna? So that's the real function of the guru, to give that knowledge, how we can fix ourselves on the lotus feet of Krishna. Okay. Hare Krishna. Any question?
Maharaj, you were saying, even within the material world, even vidya that's available to us is limited.
Yeah.
And sometimes we hear stories of, like Srila Prabhupada, where he seemed to have an understanding, a knowledge that was beyond what ordinary people have. Little things that happen. So could you just expand on it a bit?
About the vidya?
Yeah, is it just, we have our perception of things is always just going to be...
Yeah. So actually the vidya manifests through sattva gun. Sattva gun is coming out of Prakriti itself. And generally we think of Prakriti, okay, Prakriti is Maya, Maya is ignorance and bewilders us, etc. But within sattva gun, as the nature of sattva gun is to manifest vidya. So we see one of the characteristics of sattva gun mentioned in Bhagavad Gita is prakash, which means revelation or knowledge. So it doesn't mean material knowledge. It actually means spiritual knowledge. Not complete spiritual knowledge, but at least knowledge that we're not the body or the soul. So get to sattva gun, this is the natural manifestation. So sometimes we'll see people in this material world, they've reached a relatively sattvic level. So then they begin to inquire, okay, I'm not the body, I'm something spiritual, like that. I'm a spirit, let's be spiritual, let's rise above material world, etc. There's some, spiritual essence there. So they have that appreciation of some higher spiritual principle behind everything. At least that's far they go. So that's the sattvic manifestation of vidya. So that's within the material world. So Prakriti itself is a little bit of a compensation for all the Maya and all the ignorance.
So when somebody embarks on a devotional path beyond sattva,
that's nirguna, not bhakti and prema. All of that is nirguna. It is beyond the material gunas, because bhakti itself originates from the internal energy of Krishna, the Sarup Shakti or the Chit Shakti, not from the Maya Shakti. So the vidya comes from the Maya Shakti. Bhakti comes from the internal energy of Krishna. So that's completely different. But the qualities a devotee may develop may look similar to material qualities, because in sattva good you get qualities like humility, knowledge, tolerance, compassion, and these are aspects of sattva good. So the devotee also develops qualities like that. But they're all in relation to Krishna, all those qualities. Whereas the other qualities are manifestations of sattva gun. So we should distinguish the sattva gun person from the devotee who has similar qualities. They're different in their origin.
Maharaj, you talked about the demigods, and you read that there's something like 33 million or something demigods, and they control everything from blinking of the eye. And when you think of demigods, you think of they're enjoying, but it almost sounds like it's a job that they have. What's the is they just enjoying the power they have over other entities, or?
Well, yeah, it's both things. It's a job, but they are on a higher level, where they have higher bodies, higher senses. They're basically on the sattvic level, so they get sattvic enjoyment. They have longer lifespans compared to us. We have grosser bodies, lesser lifespan. Our senses are more gross, so we get lesser enjoyment. So they do have opportunity for greater enjoyment also on the sattvic level. And they have powers which are inconceivable to us. So we have, for instance, the Devat is in charge of all of our senses. So the Surya Dev is in charge of our eye, and Chandra is in charge of our mind, etc. But then we have billions of living entities in this one universe, and we have Surya Dev looking after everybody's eyes. How does he do that? But it's not difficult for him. He does have that power. This is the power given by him. Of course, they have to pray for that from the Supreme Lord, so Lord gives him that intelligence. Now, of course, he can also start delegating like we do in the material world. So he can have his Upadevatas under him, to be in charge of certain groups of people, etc. Take care of their eyes or the mind, etc. But they do have superior powers, so they get their enjoyment as a result of their status as being sattva good and having punyas, etc. But they also carry out their job, just like devotees. We have to do our duties as far as clean the temple and do all that sort of thing. But then we also have our bhakti and our services, which we have to take pleasure in spiritually.
Maharaj, we often see in India sadhus decorating their bodies with the 3 lines. Is it called Tripura?
The Shivites.
Yeah. Does that indicate their aspiration to transcend the 3 modes of material nature, or is there some other meaning?
Well, our acharyas never mentioned that. And I don't know if even the Shivites, when that originated, but it's very common among Shivites and Smartas, etc. So they probably have an explanation, negation of the 3 gunas or something like that. But basically it's related to Lord Shiva. and also with impersonalism. So we'll see the Mayavadis often also have this, even though they may not be directly Shivite worshippers of Shiva. They may even worship Vishnu, but they'll put those three lines on us. It's also a Mayavadi symbol, but I don't know if Shankaracharya originated that or not. If you go to the Kumbh Mela, then we have the Vishnu, the people following Vishnu, the yogis following Vishnu is one group, another group following Shiva. So they have different groups there. So I think the other ones, they have a Vishnu tilak also, but they're not quite Vaishnavas because their idea of Vishnu is a little bit different. They're probably going for impersonal liberation also.
Maharaj, I have a technical question. You've translated many books like Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. So what would you say is the main difference, in essence, of your translations and Srila Prabhupada's translations?
Obviously, if it's Bhagavatam or Nectar Devotion, it's actually the same text. So sometimes things may be a little unclear, so then the translations and the commentaries will clarify that, that's all. But as far as the basic, statements and facts, it's the same thing.
You mean that?
Clarification of the.
You mean that
statements.
Srila Prabhupada's purports of the Bhagavatam were not clear enough?
Sometimes we ask questions of what does that mean, so then we have to go to some other text, or even Nectar Devotion. Of course, Nectar Devotion also, because it was done very early, and I think by dictaphone, so then the order of things is a little bit mixed up sometimes and things like that. So it wasn't quite done very precisely also. It doesn't really work, so people get puzzled by certain things there. So if we go back to the original text, then it becomes a little clearer what actually it means.
Okay, and then did Prabhupada suggest that if his purports were not clear enough, then his disciples should clarify further?
I think in the Chaitanya Charitamrita said for understanding this clearly, you should start studying the Sandarbhas and this work and that work, etc. Go to the, things like that. So
the Sandarbhas, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But did he say that to his disciples to create another edition of the Bhagavatam?
Probably.
Of the Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita?
Well, again, that's it simply for the commentaries or whatever. Not exactly for the, the text itself, or for the commentaries to get things clear. That's all.
Okay.
Maharaj, just at the start of the lecture, you mentioned Lord Brahma, and it mentions that sometimes it goes back to Godhead, sometimes it mentions, I think in the 11th canto, other situations it can enter the body of Mahavishnu, and sometimes you hear that the living entities, when they first come to the material world, they come as Lord Brahma. So, yes, that's a bit of a dilemma for me, because it's, I guess, the Brahma Tattva, Lord Brahma Tattva. Is it an entry point for the living entity? Is it an exit point? Is it a mix of everything?
Well, it's not necessarily either. That's a Brahma can go to the spiritual world, but you don't have to become a Brahma to go to the spiritual world. Well, we have so many examples of devotees are human beings, and then they get prema, and they just go to Goloka or Vaikuntha or whatever. So it's not you have to do that, or you have to come in either. We enter according to our karmas. So whatever karmas we had after the last pralaya, then we continue from that point again. So if you had a karma to become Brahma, then you become a Brahma, but otherwise, if you had a karma to be a tree, then you become a tree.
So this statement that we hear that the living entity the very first contact with the material energies in the body of Lord Brahma, is that a myth?
Yeah, I think one place, maybe one or two places in the Bhagavatam purport occurs, but I looked for that for a reference from any commentary. I couldn't find one, so that's kind of a little contradictory, because then, if Brahma's the first person there, then what does he create? Because there won't be anybody else there.
Maybe a long queue also.
Yeah.
Thank you for the class, Maharaj. You were mentioning about, so our understanding is like there's a separation between the material and spiritual, But when we come into the realm of devotees, and you're mentioning how demigods have a position and they can't be biased to choose, okay, this one I'll give rain, this one I won't give rain. They give according to the qualification. So we find that also within the Krishna consciousness movement, we have had leaders where there is bias, they are conditioned, they do have children, and then they do favor them. And we also hear the part is not what you know, it's who you know. But at the same time, you mentioned about the mother gives the child sugar and then she has to know the limit. So someone in knowledge, in Krishna consciousness, they may give, for example, their children, keep giving them sugar, like, okay, you get yourself materially well situated, you justify, you are forced to go to Mangala Aarti, forced to chant, so don't worry about that, you keep going. So that knowledge is there on both sides, that even like if we have a parent or a spouse or anyone, they keep saying, okay, that's fine, you justify to keep going as you're going, but we have that knowledge and we're not instructing, okay, try to do that, but also try to work on purifying that and get the spiritual aspect. So to what degree is that falling under, like as much as we act out of Krishna consciousness, does that fall into karma? And then if we try, then that is devotional service.
Well, the actions, even in the material world, are not according to karma. The actions are a choice. The karma is the position we're put in, our particular material body. Maybe your position now is working in an office or being a teacher or whatever. That could be the karma. But the actions you do as a teacher or whatever, that's your choice. So that's not karma. So actions are different from karma. Maybe actions are influenced by your situation, especially if you're in the lower mode. But if you get up to sattva, then, which is also material, then your circumstances are less likely to influence your free will and your choice. So therefore, in the material world, the choices actually are there for tamas, raja, and sattva, but you make better choices when you're in sattva guna. Yeah. So that's as far as, material choices are concerned. The choices themselves are not karma. Yeah. As for devotees now, we're supposed to be, transcend the three gunas. So our devotional choices are beyond the gunas, and our service is beyond the gunas. So we can't say this is karma. We may be influenced by, the modes of material nature or whatever, but we cannot say that the acts of bhakti are karma, or the results of bhakti are karma. But because we do have impure, anarthas, impurities within us, then that could kind of cover our bhakti or whatever. So then when we do the devotional acts and we make decisions there, we could be influenced by, tamagun, rajagun, sattvagun, whatever, by the modes of nature, and therefore our choices may get also affected by that.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. We mentioned about demigods, because being the material world, are they affected by karmas as well? Do they have, no?
Everybody in the material world, they get born, so they die, and they go back into Mahavishnu again, they come out with the karmas again.
Being part of the Mahatattva, as you said, and we are from the external energy, external potency, but part and parcel. So they are not, they don't leave their position ever. They remain in that, because the demigods, do they fall?
Oh yeah.
They fall down, and their position can be replaced by anyone, or we can.
We have the story of Indra becoming a pig or something, whatever. So they can fall. So they get their position by their punyas, of course, by the bhakti to the Lord. Also, they get a position. But if their punyas are exhausted, they come back on earth, or they may go to one of the other dvipas and get a body in another varsha or whatever like that. They go up and down. People from Hell's planets can come up also. So the devatas are still got karma, they still got bodies, and even Lord Brahma, he's got a lifespan due to his karma.
And once they finish their bad things, they go back as Brahma again.
You give up that body, you're back with different karmas.
Thank you.
Maharaj, you said that Krishna's pastimes in the material world are even more relishable. It would seem...
According to some Acharyas. Some say, that's what I think Vishnu says, some say. Doesn't say who.
It would seem that Krishna needs the material world then in order to enjoy even more.
Yeah,
but then it's for the jiva's purification. So which one is it?
It's both.
It's both.
And Krishna, he wants to give satisfaction to his devotees, like, Yasoda Nanda. And then at the same time, he also relishes that, being a small child, running around.
So if there were no conditioned souls, Krishna couldn't enjoy that way?
Well, then the answer to that is, what happens when there's pralaya and all the universes are sucked into Mahavishnu? Then there's no material world, so what's going to happen? So then Vishnu Chakravarti says, well, by the Lord's extraordinary, inconceivable energy, he makes a facsimile of a material universe, and then he can enter into that and do his pastimes continually like that also, through different ages, etc. Anything is possible for the Supreme Lord. So in other words, he says, even the pastimes here are not temporary, they're also eternal. Yeah, it's not that they manifest at certain times, they are eternal, even in pralaya, they go on eternally.
Thank you.
I was just reading, I read recently in Srimad Bhagavatam, the mood of the pastimes of the material world, they carry it to Goloka, and Goloka they still have a similar mood. The idea of demons coming and all these things. So it seems like the pastimes, it's pretty much, it's just one program, isn't it? It's not like it's the material world, it's all Krishna's energy for his pleasure, and consequently we're able to utilize it to get purified.
Of course, we can't say the spiritual world is inferior in any way, and it's even explained that there's no age differences in Krishna, and the spirituality is eternally Kaishor. But that doesn't mean that Yasoda cannot appreciate Krishna as a small child, because due to the inconceivable potency, when she sees Krishna in Kaishor age, she still sees him as a small child and appreciates him like that. Because as I said, the Kaishor age can manifest the qualities of all the other ages. So then she still thinks of Krishna as a small child and treats him like that, even if he is Kaishor age. So that's the inconceivable potency of Krishna also.
Just the response you gave to Ranabu's question about how Krishna creates a facsimile to enjoy those pastimes. I'm wondering, is that connected? There's a statement in, I think it's the 6th chapter of the Adi Leela, where Prabhupada mentions the reason Krishna created the jivas was because the Absolute would not be complete without the jivas. Is that a similar kind of concept?
Well, the idea of jivas makes the Lord complete is that the Lord, his essential nature is bliss, ananda. But how to experience that ananda? So, ananda comes from rasa, as stated in Taittiriya Upanishad. But then rasa depends on not one entity, Krishna, but two entities. So when you have to have Krishna and another person there. So therefore, of course, you can have Shakti itself as Radharani. But then, again, why just one person? Let us have many people. So then he has to, therefore he has expansions of many, and that becomes the jivas. So then he has the jivas, and with them he has rasa, so that expresses as bliss. So in that sense, it's kind of essential to the Lord's ananda, the jiva in the spiritual world.
So in relation to Krishna creating the jivas, I thought the jivas are never created.
They're not created.
So how would that fit into he meant?
Well, we can just say the Lord doesn't create jivas, but simply his state of ananda is eternally expressed in the form of having jivas, with which he has rasa. That's all. Not that they're created at a certain point.
you. Since Krishna's eternally the Kishore age in the spiritual world, I was just wondering, what about pastime places? Like we hear that the pastime places of Braj or Srimad Bhagavatam are non-different in, like to the spiritual world. So I was wondering, what about places like Gokul, Raval, where Srimati Radhika appeared, Brahmandagat, these pastime places that we visit when we're on Parikram in Vrindavan. So how do we understand
how they
these?
exist in the spiritual world, you say?
Yes.
Oh, well, one explanation I think is given in Srimad Bhagavatam, because there also is a Mathura in the spiritual world. There's also a Dwarka there. And so how do the people there in Vrindavan, how do they think of, Krishna being born someplace or whatever? So he says there's like a distant memory of something like that. They're not, they don't particularize, okay, he was born here or he went here, but they have a particular kind of a vague memory of something happening, but it's not kind of in a time, past, present, future, because they're all in the present. So there is a type of a memory like that. Yes, Krishna did have a previous past, kind of, but because they're in the present, it's kind of minimized. So the things are there, but they're also not like in terms of at a certain time, 5 years ago, he was here like this.
So with these pastime places, are they still manifest eternally in the spiritual world?
Well, even if they're not, because there's a variety in the pastimes, even in the material world, sometimes he may have one pastime in another universe and whatever like that. But as far as material world, we can say everything is eternal anyway. So the Vrindavan in the material world is also eternal, and it keeps going on anyway in different universes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
Is all this